Who are your women heroes growing up?
Ooh, they were probably mostly on film for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta go the three ladies from 9 to 5, actually.
Dolly, Jane, and Lily.
Yes, girls. Yes.
Very good. Kia ora, hello, and welcome to this episode of Play Notes Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Duncan.
And I'm also your host, Alison Horsley.
And we're both dramaturgs, meaning we read a lot of plays.
We've likely read plays that you feel you should have, but didn't.
And that's where Play Notes Podcast comes in. And today, we're going to talk about a kick-arse woman called Antigone.
Yes!
Now, this is a play. It was written by the same guy who wrote the play we talked about in the first episode.
Oedipus.
Yes, but Oedipus isn't the guy who wrote the play.
No, that was Sophocles.
Sophocles. And if you haven't listened to the first episode, do go back because we go over some of the basics of Greek tragedy and drama that will help with, diving into this one.
Not to mention Antigone's backstory all has to do with what happened in Oedipus.
Yeah, because Oedipus was her dad.
Oedipus was her dad.
And crazy shit went down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the Greek days.
The ancient Greek days. Ancient Greek days.
Yeah.
So there were these huge outdoor theatres, amphitheatres, built into hillsides.
Yeah, because it conducted sound easily.
Yeah, the acoustics were amazing. No one had to be mic'd.
Yeah, that's right.
And they could seat up to 14,000 people.
Often, we think that it was probably men. The presence of women is contested, apparently, but not quite sure. But definitely Athenian citizens.
Yes. Okay, so
about 14,000 people.
Yeah, outside. And the most important people would sit right at the front.
So they could be seen, seeing, at the seeing place.
So that seating area was called the theatron.
Yes.
Which is where our term theatre comes from. It means the seeing place. And what were they looking at? Well, in the first part, they were looking at the orchestra.
Which was round.
Round. And that's where the chorus would perform.
The chorus would be a group of usually Athenian citizens, a group of 12 to 15 of them. Men, all men. Even later on, when we have choruses of women, they still would have been played by men. But and the job of the chorus is to be not only a character on stage, but they also sing and dance and are reciting poetry. And they're a kind of intermediary between the audience and the characters on stage. So they both talk to the other characters on stage, like in a group, the chorus speaks together, and also they talk directly to the audience. So they fill the audience in on what they need to know, and they also sometimes give a little lip to the other characters on stage, especially when they disagree with them.
Yeah. And behind the orchestra, was there was sort of a platform area and the scaeni, where our current day term scene comes from.
Yeah, and the area, like a backdrop, and the area in front of that was known as the proscene, which is where we get our term proscenium, which is the name of the picture frame structure in most modern
conventional
theaters.
Western theatre.
Yeah, in a conventional theatre. So a lot of these terms are definitely from Greek theatre.
And the scaeni was really thought to be a sort of a big building, at least a couple of stories.
Yeah.
And it had 3 doors in it. And part of the function of this building was, as we said in episode 1, all the violence happened off stage.
Inside the building often.
Yeah.
Then, which is why often in these plays it's set out front of a palace. So in Oedipus, it's pretty much out front of the palace. In Antigone, it is also outdoors. It's always in a public arena, usually, like on the front porch of the palace.
And we talked about in last episode that the audience would have known these stories.
Yes, absolutely.
To a degree. It's, they went along to see the how, not so much the what.
Yeah.
Because they know what happens. But how does it unfold?
Yeah, they all know Antigone's background. They're just coming to watch how it goes down in this particular playwright's version of her story.
And these plays took place in a festival. It was just one part of this big festival called City Dionysia. That's how I say it. Dionysia. How do you say it, Alison?
I say City Dionysia.
Okay, you're probably right.
I don't know about that.
But it was in honor of the god Dionysus.
Yes.
Who I think of as the good time god.
He's the rock and roll guy.
Yeah.
So he is the wine drinking, bloody, fertile, messy god, right? So he's the fertility god,
right,
in a lot of ways. So anything that involves sex, pleasure, indulgence, overindulgence, procreation, basically is
your guy.
He's your guy.
And this big festival that it went over for a couple of months at least.
Yeah.
Longer. It was like a city pride event.
Yeah, and so everybody who's anybody is going to this event to see the plays competing. And so usually there were going to be 3 tragedies competing against each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and usually those were trilogies actually competing against each other that 3 different playwrights had written. And I'm bad at math, so that's like, 9 plays? No, they each had a 4th and it was a satyr play. Oh lord, I'm passing out now. Okay, so our backstory is where we left the Oedipus clan at the end of Oedipus.
What was left?
Or what was left of it. He was exiled. He roamed in exile. Over time, his 2 sons, Polynices and Eteocles, that's how I pronounce them, and his 2 daughters, Ismene and Antigone, have been raised in Thebes. Creon is the king, and Polynices and Eteocles are supposed to be sharing power as well. Eteocles doesn't fulfill his end.
They don't play nice.
He don't play nice. Polynices then leads an army against Thebes to try and regain what he believes is his rightful crown, right? So the 2 brothers kill each other in this conflict, but then Creon decrees that because Polynices has led an army against Thebes, that Polynices shouldn't be buried, but Eteocles should be buried with like full military honors and all of that.
His corpse is left out to
the scavengers and the dogs and
the birds and the whatever.
Anybody who's anybody to eat it, basically.
And this is a real political stance that Creon makes.
Yeah, and a bit of a religious one as well, but it's like a tough on crime stance.
This is his big broken windows.
Yeah. So he's making an example of Polynices.
And the story really gets rolling because Antigone, Polynices' sister, Creon's niece, has a very different take on this.
Yeah.
She believes is most important that you honour the gods' religious rites. You must bury the body.
Yes.
You cannot leave a body out.
Right.
Like that.
And also it's her brother, and so she wants to pay him that honor. Whereas to Creon, he makes a much harder line and says we have to make essentially a political gesture and not honor the gods in this way because Polynices is a traitor.
And she buries the body twice in the play.
Yeah.
The first time round, I mean, she tells her sister what she's going to do.
Yeah.
But her sister's not... She sort of agrees in principle, but she doesn't... She knows they're going to get in huge trouble if they do this, so she chickens out.
Yeah, she chickens out. Ismene chickens out. Antigone goes and pretty much layers some dust over the body. And at that point, word gets back to Creon that somebody has done that. So, of course, Creon then reminds everybody of the death penalty, basically, that he's laid out for anyone who tries to bury the body of Polynices. And then the sentry comes back in and is like, oh, she did it! A lady buried him again!
And they know who it is. She gets dragged in.
And she gets dragged in, and she is announced as being Oedipus's daughter. So even before she enters, we know that it's Oedipus's daughter.
So Antigone is engaged to her cousin,
Haemon.
Creon's son, Haemon.
Yes. Yeah, so they're engaged. And so the fact that Antigone has gone against Creon's wishes puts Creon in a pretty awkward position. It also puts Antigone in pretty bad stead with her father-in-law-to-be, but she holds firm to her purpose. So Creon is, of course, enraged. Haemon comes to speak on Antigone's behalf, and Creon says a lot of pretty misogynistic things, basically. He's like, look, man, there's other girls.
It was a very misogynistic society.
Yeah, it was a very, yeah. So he's like, you know what? I can't believe you're siding with the woman There will be other women. Let her bear out her punishment. And Haman pretty much says, if you punish her, if you continue in this way, you will not see me again. Creon rules that the punishment for Antigone is going to be that she's going to be buried alive, basically. And Tiresias gets dragged in because everybody needs some wisdom at this point.
The blind seer that we met last time talking about Oedipus.
Yeah, and as always happens to Tiresias, does Creon behave well when Tiresias speaks the truth to Creon, Emily?
No.
He's basically like, get away, old man, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. This is the irony with Tiresias.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And Tiresias pretty much says, Creon, your family is going to be cursed. You're going to experience a lot of tragedy.
But he's like, I'm kinging here.
Yeah, I'm kinging here.
Yeah, I've got to do this well.
Yeah, I'm real important, which is kind of like...
stand my ground.
Yeah, which is a super bad idea when you're living in a polytheistic society where you have really vengeful gods, because they go and get you.
And there are these prophecies, and there's
prophecies
going down.
Yeah, so don't try and avoid the prophecy. But Creon still sticks with his plan. He decides he does change his mind ultimately.
His MO.
He decides after Tiresias, he's like, you know what? I do have a change of heart. I'm gonna go get her out. So he does have a change of heart, to his credit. It's a little too late though, because then we have a messenger who comes on stage who tells us that Antigone has hanged herself in her like buried alive tomb
cave.
Building tomb. And that Haman has spat in his father's face when Creon arrived there to try and stop the whole thing, and then Haman has killed himself. And the Creon has witnessed that.
And then it gets worse.
It gets worse!
Another character who we haven't actually met yet
is
Creon's wife.
Right. Eurydice. Haman's mother, Eurydice. Not the same Eurydice who shows up elsewhere in Greek tragedy. But Eurydice hears this relayed from the messenger, and she goes and kills herself.
Yeah.
So this leaves Creon at the end of the play Antigone, having fulfilled his fate, basically, which is what Tiresias said would happen, which is he's accountable for multiple murders or deaths.
And this brings us back to one of the real sort of nubby questions with Antigone, where we talk about it as a Greek tragedy.
Yeah!
And that is who really is the protagonist. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this term, protagonist essentially means the main character. Mm-hmm. And in Greek tragedy, the tragedy happens to the main character.
Usually who the play is named after.
Who you would assume in this case is Antigone.
You would think.
But if you want to get technical about it,
what's her?
She...
Yeah, well, usually because the main character in a Greek tragedy has a fatal flaw or a tragic flaw, or Marsha.
And those other Greek tragedy conventions need to happen.
The recognition and the reversal. Yeah, and it seems like with Antigone, those kind of happen before the play even begins, once because she's already made this decision. And in some ways, she was born with it, right? Like, she was born under this curse. Mm-hmm. So this family is not going to be okay no matter what they do, because that's inborn.
So if we're talking about the how and what unfolds in front of us and the audience, it seems that the protagonist is actually Creon.
Yeah, because he's the one who experiences the greatest fall in a way, because he's gone from being this political leader, or what he thinks is the ideal version of a political leader, into being this familyless man, this pathetic person at the end of the play. Yeah. He hasn't lost his total status in society, but he's lost everything that made him who he was. But also because he wasn't able to make a proclamation that he stood by. Also, right? Like, so he changed his mind, which is a noble thing, humanitarianly wise. But as a leader, he's now a little bit questionable too. It's one of the reasons why I think the play is still really popular, is it addresses the role of the individual in fulfilling whatever they feel is a religious or moral obligation, as opposed to a civil obligation.
Right.
That, like, if Creon represents the rule of law and the need to abide by laws that have been created by humans versus laws that have been created by the gods that one must abide.
Or personal principles.
To bury your brother.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so in that way, the play is really useful because it pits Antigone, who's following her own internal moral compass, against Creon, who has seemingly arbitrarily made a human law that he abides by. And so that's why I think the play is still popular, is that it allows for that discussion, and it can hold that much philosophy that you can stage it in different cultures, in different political times, to make quite a statement.
Yeah, it's a really great example of high stakes.
Yeah, because Antigone is willing to die for her cause, just out of principle. She's willing to throw away. I mean, she doesn't care about the marriage, like her impending marriage to Haman, any of that. All of that pales in comparison for her to the need to bury her brother and appease the gods in that way, but also to honor and respect her brother.
I would really encourage people to pick up a copy of the script, whatever translation, you pick it up in and read
Lots
it from.
of adaptations.
Yeah, the language is beautiful. Birds are sometimes very beautiful. They're sometimes very sinister.
Sometimes they eat dead people.
Yeah, it's very clever.
In the scene between Haman and Creon, Haman is trying to get Creon to change his mind, and Haman says to Creon, "Let not your first thought be your only thought."
Ooh.
Right?